We can't make it with just Social Security. We'll be relying on you two from now on. Our legs are so bad that we can't manage without the help of younger people." John, my father-in-law, spoke in a theatrical tone, making it obvious that he was using this as an excuse to settle in. Without consulting me at all, my husband Daniel had decided to let them move into our house. I never got along with my in-laws, Lyndall and John, and this new living arrangement was nothing but torture for me. Despite their harassment and overbearing attitude, I endured it somehow until one day I overheard Daniel and Linda talking about me. "Olivia's like a convenient housekeeper, don't you think? She does whatever we tell her, and it's so easy," Daniel said. "Absolutely. At first, I was worried when I heard she came from a fatherless home and dropped out of school, but I guess it paid off letting you marry her," Linda replied. Those words alone were heartbreaking enough. But to make things worse, Daniel also seemed to have a mistress. Reaching my limit, I resolved to divorce Daniel and leave the house. But I know one thing for sure. There's no way this foolish family will ever live peacefully for long. I'm Olivia, in my 40s, working part-time. It's been 15 years since I married Daniel, who works for a trading company. I still remember the first time I met Linda and John, when they learned I had dropped out of school and grew up without a father. They gave me such cold, piercing looks that I froze. The icy stares left me unable to do anything but lower my head. However, when I saw them the next time, they suddenly greeted me with smiles. To this day, I have no idea what Daniel said to convince them, but their smiles felt insincere, and I couldn't bring myself to trust their words. My marriage to Daniel wasn't easy from the start. He would always say, "Men earn the money, so women should take care of the home," leaving all household chores to me. Despite that, his salary was low, and it was obvious that he couldn't cover our living expenses without me working part-time. Even so, he never expressed any gratitude for that. He would complain whenever the housework fell slightly behind, yet he showed no interest in how much I worried over the household budget every night. Even so, I kept working hard for him, thinking about how he worked late every night. But as the years passed, I felt increasingly isolated. Even after 15 years of marriage, we hadn't been blessed with children, which might have added to the strain. As the days went by, my hands grew heavier with the weight of housework, and my heart grew more and more exhausted. That day was no different. After finishing my part-time job, I picked up groceries for dinner and returned home. As I opened a door, lively voices from the living room greeted me, unusual for our house. I had a bad feeling. Sure enough, Linda and John were sitting on the living room sofa, chatting enthusiastically with Daniel. "I'm home. Welcome back. Starting today, Mom and Dad will be living with us," Daniel said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Without any prior discussion, Daniel had suddenly decided that Linda and John would move in. I was so shocked and furious that I couldn't even speak. I wanted to yell, "What are you thinking?" But with them right in front of me, I held back. I set the shopping bags down on the floor and glared at Daniel, pouring all my helpless anger into my stare. John, wearing an unpleasant grin, said, "Our legs are so bad that we can't manage without the help of younger people." He spoke in such a theatrical manner that it was clear he was just making excuses to stay. Linda chimed in, dramatically shrugging her shoulders. "We can't make it with just Social Security. We'll be relying on you two from now on." There wasn't a shred of gratitude or consideration in their attitudes. Feeling the weight of their oppressive stares, I suppressed my anger and disgust and could only nod silently. That night, I prepared dinner as usual. or rather, not quite as usual. This time, it was for 4 people, including Linda and John. The sound of their cheerful conversation with Daniel pierced my back as I cooked, making my hands feel heavier than usual. When dinner started, Linda and John ate the food I had prepared as if it were their right, then began critiquing it freely. "This flavor is a bit too strong, don't you think? Maybe it's more suited for younger people," Linda said. "Well, it's not bad, but it's a little much for older folks. Next time, try to keep that in mind," John added. They acted as though they owned the house, their arrogant comments and behavior filling me with disgust and humiliation. After that torturous meal ended, I fled to the sink to start cleaning the dishes. But as I began washing, I sensed movement behind me. Turning around, I saw Linda and John pulling unused plates and glasses out of the cupboard and setting them on the table. What are you doing with those dishes all of a sudden?" I asked Linda, my confusion evident. The moment the words left my mouth, Linda's face twisted in anger, and she shouted, "Of course, we're having drinks after dinner. Don't you have any common sense?" Her sudden outburst left me frozen in shock. I wanted to snap back that there was no need to yell, but I held my tongue. Satisfied by my stunned reaction, Linda shifted her scowl into a saccharine smile. "Now that you understand, hurry up and bring out some drinks and snacks, won't you?" she said, her tone commanding. In the end, I found myself preparing yet another round of food for their post-dinner drinks. If they had at least invited me to join, it might have softened the blow. But of course, no such invitation came. Once the drinks were over, I was left to clean up the glasses and plates they had used. Hoping someone might offer to help, I glanced at the 3 of them. But there they were, tipsy and carefree, laughing together while watching TV. Noticing my gaze, Linda pointed her chin towards the table and said, "There are still dishes left over there. Make sure to wash those too." A few plates I had missed still sat on the table, but instead of bringing them over, Linda just made her snide remark and turned her attention back to the TV. Her words and attitude sent a surge of rage through me, but I couldn't let it show, so I bit my lip hard and said nothing. The 3 of them paid no attention to me, continuing their lively conversation and laughter. Swallowing my anger, I simply kept my hands moving, washing dish after dish in silence. One morning, Linda and John said they were going to the hospital and began getting ready to leave. But Linda, despite the simple errand, spent an unusual amount of time putting on makeup and carefully picking out her clothes. Watching her, I felt like something was off, but I didn't have the courage to ask. With my own work shift approaching, I was too busy clearing the breakfast dishes and finishing other chores to pay much attention to their strange behavior. Without so much as a glance my way, the 2 of them left the house. Daniel had already gone to work by then, leaving me alone in the house, a rare and welcome moment of solitude. After quickly finishing my chores, I realized I had some time before heading to work. Relieved, I sat down to rest, idle watching TV. That's when I noticed something strange. My wallet was sitting haphazardly on the kitchen table. Normally, I always kept my wallet on the dresser in the bedroom. There was no way it should have ended up on the kitchen table unless someone else had moved it. Feeling uneasy, I decided to check its contents, only to find that some money was missing. There was no doubt in my mind. Either Linda or John had taken it. Daniel had never done anything like this in all our years of marriage. If he needed money, he would just ask me directly. He would never silently take it. Linda and John, on the other hand, not only moved in uninvited but now even had the audacity to steal from me. I was determined to confront them about it, but by then they were already gone. Frustrated and upset, I went to work, with that anger weighing heavily on my mind. My morning shift lasted about 5 hours, and when I returned home, Linda and John were still not back. It was already well past lunchtime, and I couldn't imagine their hospital visit taking this long. I couldn't shake the thought that they'd used my stolen money to go out and enjoy themselves. The thought alone was infuriating. Several more hours passed, and finally, as evening approached, they returned. When I went to the front door to confront them, John greeted me with a casual smile. "We ran out of money for the cab. Sorry, but can you cover the rest for us?" "What? Wait a minute." I was dumbfounded, caught between anger and disbelief. From the doorway, I could see the cab waiting just outside. I was so overwhelmed I could barely process what was happening. I had planned to confront them about stealing my money, but now they were asking me for even more. Still, I couldn't let the cab driver, an innocent party, be inconvenienced. Reluctantly, I stepped outside and paid the fare. I hoped that would be the end of it, but no sooner had I handed over the money than the driver got out and opened the trunk. Dreading what was coming, I turned toward Linda and John. Linda, without missing a beat, called out, "Make sure to bring those in for us, would you?" We're absolutely exhausted from the hospital. I trembled with anger, but, swallowing my pride, took the bags from the driver. The luggage included not only their personal bags, but also multiple shopping bags from stores that could only be found at the nearby mall. It was clear they had spent the day shopping and enjoying themselves. Struggling under the weight of their many purchases, I carried everything into the house. Linda and John disappeared into the back of the house as soon as they stepped inside, without a single word of thanks. That night, unable to hold it in any longer, I decided to speak to Daniel about what had happened. "Daniel, Linda and John took money from my wallet. I need you to say something to them about it." But instead of support, Daniel frowned. "Are you seriously complaining about something so small? Just think of them as your parents and treat them with respect." Discomfort and despair spread through me. It was painfully clear that Daniel didn't understand my feelings at all. That night, as I finished cleaning up the kitchen alone, I cried quietly. For the first time, I realized with certainty that I had no allies in this house. But my misery didn't end there. A month later, I discovered something even more devastating. It was a day like any other, except work had been exhausting. An extended post-shift meeting left me completely drained. Too tired to do much else, I rushed through my chores and decided to go to bed early. However, perhaps because I was so overtired, or maybe because I had gone to bed earlier than usual, I woke up just a few hours later. The clock showed it wasn't even midnight yet. Thirsty, I headed toward the kitchen, but as I stepped into the hallway, I noticed light spilling out from the living room. It seemed Linda and Daniel were still awake, chatting away happily. Their conversations were usually laced with insults about someone or other, and frankly, I couldn't stand listening to them. So, instead of interrupting, I decided to move quietly, making sure they wouldn't notice me as I walked down the hallway toward the kitchen. As I passed by the living room, I suddenly heard my name being mentioned. I didn't want to listen. I already knew it would just be more bad-mouthing about me. Even so, my body froze in place in front of the door. Olivia's like a convenient housekeeper, isn't she? She does whatever we ask, and it's so easy, Daniel said with a laugh. Exactly. At first, I was worried about her growing up without a father, but letting you marry her turned out to be the right decision. Hearing their words, my entire body felt as though it had turned to ice. The realization that they saw me as nothing more than a tool was like a knife to the heart. And worse, Daniel was laughing as he insulted me. Women like her, Low-educated and obedient are the best. High-educated women don't listen to men, he said, chuckling. I felt as though the ground had been pulled out from under me. I wasn't even a person to them. I was just something useful. Anger and humiliation boiled up inside me. But the worst blow was yet to come. Linda's next casual question shattered everything. By the way, how's the real one going? All good. The real one. All good. The ominous words made my chest tighten. Yay, all good. Unlike Olivia, she makes good money and is a real catch, Daniel said with a smug tone. Daniel had a mistress, and Linda knew about her. I can't wait to see a grandchild, Linda said, smiling. I bet your girlfriend will be the one to give us one, right? My mind went blank. Linda wasn't just ignoring my existence. She was actively looking forward to Daniel's mistress becoming part of their family. I had been treated like a fool, belittled and mocked, for who knows how long. The betrayal and disdain were too much to bear. I knew then that I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped into the living room, ready to confront them. Linda and Daniel, lounging comfortably in front of the TV, were startled to see me appear suddenly. They had clearly assumed I was asleep. I've had enough. Get out of this house right now, I shouted. The room fell silent for a moment. What the hell? Yelling in the middle of the night. Don't you know any manners? Daniel snapped, frowning at me. John, who had been asleep, stumbled into the room, clearly woken by the commotion. He looked angry but paused when he noticed something was different about me. John, you're here too. Good. Let me make this clear. I want both of you out of this house, I said firmly. Linda and John stared at me, stunned. Daniel glared, his face darkening. After a moment, Linda let out an exasperated sigh and sneered. Are you seriously throwing out elderly people with disabilities? Are you out of your mind? Her words were dripping with mockery, clearly intended to paint me as a heartless person. John joined in, frowning and yelling at me. After all we've done for you, you're just going to abandon us when we need you most. What an ungrateful woman. I gasped at his words. A rage I had never felt before surged within me. How dare he dismiss all the effort I had put into this household as if it meant nothing? My lips trembled as I fought to contain my anger, but I managed to respond in a calm tone. I've been patient for the sake of this family, but not once have you ever treated me as part of it. John's face twisted in fury as he stood abruptly from the sofa. If you hate it so much, then you should be the one to leave. Who talks to my parents like that? Daniel's face was flushed red with anger, but the moment I heard those words, a strange calm washed over me. I no longer felt any attachment to this house. I nodded and replied in a quiet voice, "Fine, I'll leave." The atmosphere in the room turned icy. Daniel froze, his eyes wide with shock. "Wait a minute," he stammered, clearly panicked. But I was done being at his mercy. I returned to the bedroom, quickly changed clothes, and pulled out the suitcase I had stashed away in the corner. From the day Linda and John had moved in, I had suspected this day might come, so I had been quietly preparing. I packed only the essentials, closed the suitcase, and started walking toward the door. As I made my way to the front door, Linda sneered and said in a scornful tone to Daniel, "Why are you so worried? Who cares about a woman like her?" Her callous remark only strengthened my resolve. I paused at the door, turned to face them, Daniel, Linda, and John. I took a deep breath and said, "Goodbye. I'm done being bound by you." The moment I stepped out of that house, I felt a weight lift from my chest, as if a heavy stone inside me had been chipped away. The next morning, I woke up in a cramped motel room, Checking my phone, I saw several missed calls from Daniel. Exhausted both physically and emotionally, I left the motel and reluctantly called him back. He picked up before the first ring had even finished. "Olivia, I want to talk things over properly. I think we were both too emotional yesterday," he said in a rushed, desperate tone. But my heart had already grown cold. Still, I decided to give him one chance to explain himself. "Fine, I'll be at the cafe near the house. Meet me there." The cafe I chose was close to the house, but it was located up a steep slope, a place I usually avoided because of the inconvenience. But I had a reason for picking it. If Linda and John's claims about their mobility issues were true, they wouldn't even be able to make it to this cafe. I decided to wait for the three of them while having a light breakfast in the cafe. Before long, they entered the cafe together. Considering Linda and John's supposedly bad legs, climbing the steep slope to this cafe should have been a challenge. Yet they walked in as if it was no big deal. But the moment they spotted me seated and sipping coffee, they exaggeratedly started dragging their feet as they approached. "Why did you call us to a place like this? Couldn't you pick somewhere more reasonable?" John grumbled. I met his gaze calmly and smiled. "Well done making it up here. By the way, John and Linda, you both seemed quite lively walking here." At my words, Linda and John's faces noticeably stiffened, and they hastily began making excuses. "Well, it was really hard for us," Linda said, her tone dripping with false sincerity. "But we pushed through the pain to talk to you." "It was so difficult," I responded with a faint smile and shrugged indifferently. "Is that so?" "Well, actually, I've been looking into your situation a bit." Their expressions froze instantly, and I continued, savoring their visible discomfort. "You've mentioned going to the hospital often, so I decided to follow you a few times. But I never once saw you enter a hospital. Instead, I often saw you shopping around town, enjoying yourself at the racetrack, or trying your luck with lottery tickets." As I spoke calmly, their faces turned increasingly pale. John, unable to hide his agitation, clenched his hands tightly on the table. You've been spying on us." "Yes," I said, my tone unwavering. I wasn't planning to sit by and keep losing money without knowing why. On the days they claimed to be visiting the hospital, I noticed money disappearing from my wallet without fail. Finally fed up, I had taken time off work to investigate their activities, observing them closely. Linda and John's faces relaxed briefly before John suddenly leaned back, his tone shifting to indignant defiance. "So what? Where we go, and what we do, is none of your business." Anger flared within me again, but their words no longer had the power to shake me. I fixed them with a cold, steady gaze. Seeing this, Daniel quickly stepped in, his voice tinged with desperation. "Olivia, listen. If you come back now, I'll forgive you. Let's just drop this and..." Before he could finish, I pulled out the item I had prepared. From my bag, I retrieved a signed divorce application and slammed it onto the table. The sound echoed in the room, and Linda and John's faces turned to stone. "I don't need your forgiveness. This is my answer." I pulled out my wallet, set some cash down for my meal, and stood. Linda opened her mouth as if to say something, but I was already on my feet, turning to leave. Behind me, I heard shouting voices escalating into what sounded like curses, but I didn't look back. I walked out of the cafe, flagged down a cab waiting nearby, and climbed into the back seat. Through the rearview mirror, I saw Linda, John, and Daniel burst out of the cafe, yelling angrily, but the cab door shut with a decisive click, and I ignored their frantic shouts as the driver pulled away, leaving them standing in the dust behind me. A few weeks had passed since then, but Daniel's calls persisted relentlessly. Each time his number appeared on my phone, I blocked it without hesitation. His desperate messages no longer stirred any feelings in me. Having resolved to leave everything behind, I had no reason to listen to his excuses or apologies. One evening, after finishing my shift at the supermarket, I stepped outside and froze in my tracks. There, waiting in the dimming light, was Daniel. His face was pale, and the moment he saw me, he rushed over with uncharacteristic urgency. I stood motionless, stunned, as he stopped in front of me and, without warning, pleaded desperately, "Please, Olivia, help me. I'm at my limit." I hesitated for a moment but maintained my composure, listening carefully to his words. His voice trembled with emotion as he continued, tears welling in his eyes. "They're about to cut off the water, gas, and electricity. I don't know what to do. Please, help me." The old me might have felt a pang of sympathy, might have even considered helping him, but not anymore. "You can just pay the bills," I said coolly. "The accounts are all in your name." For years, I had been the one managing and paying the household utilities. After slamming down the divorce papers, I had withdrawn all my savings and closed my bank account. I had resolved to cut every tie, both financial and emotional. "All the bills were covered with my salary," I continued. "I don't see why I should keep paying. It's not my responsibility anymore." At my words, Daniel dropped to his knees, pressing his head to the ground as his shoulders shook with sobs. "Crying won't change anything," I said flatly. "There's no reason for me to help you anymore." As passers-by cast judgmental glances at the scene, Daniel remained on the ground, his voice breaking with despair. "Please, Olivia, I'm begging you. I'm out of money." His tone was that of a man clinging to his last shred of hope. I looked down at him coldly, remaining silent for a while. No matter what he did, I no longer felt any sympathy in my heart. However, his desperate attitude did bother me just a little. "Why are you this broke?" I asked. "You're still working, aren't you? Where's all your money?" Daniel averted his eyes, mumbling incoherently. In that moment, I sensed he was hiding something. After a long pause, he finally gave in, his voice low and trembling. "Actually, I lost my job about 2 years ago." His confession sent a jolt through me, but I kept my expression neutral, waiting for him to elaborate. If I'd heard this before everything fell apart, I might have been crushed. "I was fired," he admitted, "because I forced myself on a junior female colleague, asking her to date me. That's why." His words filled me with a mix of anger and disgust. I was furious that he had kept such a critical truth from me. "That doesn't add up. Linda always talked about how well you were doing at work," I said, my voice laced with skepticism. It didn't make sense. If he'd lost his job over something so serious, how could things have seemed fine to Linda and the rest? I lied. "Every time I saw them, they wouldn't stop pestering me about wanting grandchildren. It was annoying, so I told them I had a girlfriend. They were thrilled, so I just played along." I was utterly speechless. Daniel's irresponsibility and thoughtlessness were staggering. His willingness to deceive his parents just to justify his actions showed how far he had fallen. I could no longer expect anything from him. For a moment, I simply stared at him coldly, saying nothing. Then, with a deep breath, I made up my mind and said calmly, "Fine. If this is truly the last time, I'll give you some money. But remember, this is absolutely the last time. If you come to me again, I won't forgive you." Together, we went to the bank, where I withdrew an amount slightly more than a month's worth of expenses, and handed it to him. "Olivia, thank you, truly, thank you," he said tearfully, repeating his gratitude over and over. But I was no longer listening. "From now on, figure things out for yourself. Get a part-time job or something. Live on your own." My words were a final warning. Daniel opened his mouth to say something but couldn't find the words. He simply nodded, stood up slowly, and walked away without another word. A month later, I was adjusting to my new life. Things had finally begun to feel peaceful, until the sudden ring of my phone shattered that calm. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. An uneasy feeling gripped me, but I answered anyway. "I'm on my way to your parents' old house right now. I'll leave Dad and Mom with you, so they're your responsibility from here on out," he said in a light, almost casual tone. His flippant attitude caught me off guard, but something about his voice sounded careless, almost resigned. It dawned on me that perhaps Daniel had grown fed up with John and Linda's reckless spending. He might be trying to unload the burden of dealing with them onto me. "That's impossible," I replied icily. "I have nothing to do with any of you anymore. I told you it was the last time." Daniel let out a sly chuckle, his voice dripping with triumph. "Too late. We're already at your parents' old house. They're your problem now." Before I could respond, he hung up. I didn't feel anger. What I felt was a sense of urgency, mixed with a deep sigh of exasperation. I rushed to my parents' old house, dreading what I might find. When I arrived, my worst fears were confirmed. Linda and John were already there, embroiled in a heated argument with an unfamiliar family. Linda's voice was shrill as she shouted, her face twisted in anger. "What do you mean you're living here? This is our house." The family appeared confused and utterly fed up. Hurrying over, I immediately apologized to the strangers. "I'm so sorry for the trouble," I said earnestly. Linda and John turned toward me, startled but quickly raising their voices again. "Olivia, while you were away, these strangers broke into our house. Call the police." I nearly laughed at the absurdity of it all. "You're the ones who should be worried about the police," I said, barely concealing my amusement. "What are you talking about?" I smiled coldly and replied slowly, "This house is no longer mine. I sold it a long time ago, and it now belongs to this family." The moment my words sank in, Linda and John's faces froze. Daniel, enraged by my words, raised his fist and advanced toward me. "Don't do anything reckless," he shouted, his voice echoing through the neighborhood. But I remained calm and continued to look at him. This house had originally belonged to my mom, and no matter what he said, it didn't matter anymore. This is no longer my home. You have no right to complain. Daniel was left speechless, standing there in shock, unable to respond. As Linda and John continued to protest, Daniel's expression hardened, as if he had made a decision. Suddenly, he turned to face them. "This isn't my problem anymore. It's all yours," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Daniel, where are you going? Don't leave us here." Without a word, Daniel turned his back on Linda and John and left, walking away quickly. Linda, stunned and angry, yelled after him, and John, looking frantic, tried to chase after him. But Daniel didn't look back, disappearing without a trace. Linda and John, still fuming, eventually gave up the chase and left. There was no sign of the limp they had claimed to have before. After apologizing to the new residents, I quickly left the scene. However, it seemed that Linda and John weren't ready to give up. That night, they returned to my parents' former home. Under the cover of darkness, they set up a tent on the property without permission and even started a bonfire. It seemed they were trying to stake a claim, holding on to the idea that this was still their place. In the middle of the night, a neighbor noticed the smoke and the strange sight and immediately called the police. The sound of a police siren broke the quiet of the night, and Linda and John were surrounded by officers on the spot. "This is our house," Linda screamed. "You're wrong for doing this. We're the rightful owners," John shouted, angrily waving his hands. The police remained calm and composed. They quickly determined that the two were trespassing and arrested them on the spot. How do I know all this? Simple, because the police informed me. Apparently, the police had tried to contact Daniel first but couldn't reach him despite several attempts, so they had no choice but to call me. But to me, those two were strangers, and I had no reason to get involved. I was asked to pick them up, but I refused. They acknowledged that I had every right to do so. However, as someone familiar with the situation, I was required to visit the police station and explain everything that had happened. I wasn't in an interrogation room. Instead, I was in a partitioned-off corner of an office. As I was explaining the events, I suddenly heard a commotion from far away. It was Daniel's voice. "Are you kidding me? I don't have anything to do with this. Why should I be responsible for those idiots?" Apparently, Daniel had somehow been found and brought in. But considering it wasn't a serious incident, the police seemed extra harsh, clearly frustrated by Linda and John's behavior. The officer lecturing Daniel looked furious, unlike the officer who had been speaking to me, who was calm and patient. Daniel, who had been scolded by the police, was now reluctantly agreeing to take John and Linda back with him. His face was one of utter despair. From a distance, I couldn't help but feel immense satisfaction. "Serves you right," I muttered to myself as I watched the three of them leave, still arguing and fighting, their backs retreating into the distance. Afterward, Daniel easily agreed to the divorce on the condition that he would not seek any compensation in the divorce settlement. For me, the only goal was to end my relationship with him, so I was content with that condition. Later, I learned that Linda and John had already spent all of their retirement funds and were using their Social Security benefits for gambling every month. They had been indulging in immediate pleasures without considering their future. Similarly, after parting ways with me, Daniel had been unable to find stable work, and his prospects for income were uncertain. It was hard to feel any sympathy for him. In the end, Linda, John, and Daniel moved into a cheap, old apartment that didn't require a guarantor. The apartment was worn out, with dirty walls and creaky floors, but I suppose they had no other options. At first, it seemed they managed to live together, but the situation quickly worsened. According to what I heard, a minor argument broke out between Daniel and John. The argument escalated, and eventually, Daniel stormed out of the apartment in anger. As John rushed after him, attempting to descend the old apartment stairs, the floorboard suddenly cracked. John fell down the stairs, screaming in pain. Despite hearing his screams, Daniel did not turn back. He silently walked away from the scene. Even when John continued to scream for help, Daniel never returned. I was told that John had to endure the pain at the bottom of the stairs until one of the neighbors noticed and called an ambulance. When I heard this, though I knew I shouldn't laugh at someone else's misfortune, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dark amusement. John suffered complex fractures to both of his legs, and due to his age, it seemed unlikely that he would ever walk properly again. The doctors told him that he would need long-term rehabilitation, and the surgery and hospitalization costs would be high. However, Linda and John had no financial means to cover these expenses. Reluctantly, Linda found a part-time job nearby and began taking care of John, living off her small income. The luxurious life they once enjoyed was a thing of the past, and they were forced to confront the harsh reality of their situation. Meanwhile, Daniel continued down the path of self-destruction. Even after losing his job, he couldn't let go of his obsession and started stalking a woman who had once been his subordinate. However, the woman was already married and living happily with her husband. Daniel's behavior escalated, and eventually, it led to a confrontation with the woman's husband, who forcefully confronted Daniel. The police were called, and Daniel was arrested for stalking. His life had completely spiraled into irreparable ruin. As for me, I had begun a new life. I used the money from selling the parents' house to find a new home. Unlike my previous house, this place was bright, spacious, and cozy. I decided to start an online craft class, something I had dreamed of doing for many years. At first, I was unsure, but gradually, my students increased, and my life became more stable than it had ever been. Sometimes, I held lunch meetings with my students, and the once lonely days seemed a distant memory. I was now living a peaceful and fulfilling life. I had managed to build a new life with my own hands. The joy of teaching crafts every day and the friendships I formed with new people enriched my life, making the suffering of the past a thing of the past. The days in my new home were calm and peaceful. It is true happiness for me.
Never received an allowance? What do you mean?
What? This bombshell dropped during a conversation with my father-in-law one day. I couldn't believe something like this was happening behind my back. My name is Emma, and I'm 29. I've been living with my husband John since we got married 4 years ago. So, this happened on a particular day. When I came home from work, my usually late-arriving husband was already home. I sensed something was off just by looking at him. Cans of beer and highball drinks were scattered all over the floor, and his face was flushed red. "Whoa, John, what's going on?" As I rushed over, he snapped, "Enough! I can't take it anymore." "What do you mean you can't take it? And since when do you drink this much?" "That's my business." "Darn it, my lousy boss." "Lousy boss?" John complains about his company, constantly bad-mouthing his boss and colleagues. Something must have gone wrong at work today, too. I decided to try and calm him down.
It's been a tough day, huh? I'm making your favorite stew for dinner tonight. Let's eat together.
Despite my upbeat attitude, his facial expression remained unchanged. In fact, he seemed even more irritated. My husband kept drinking, so I decided to speak up. "Hey, John, are you okay? You have work tomorrow. Maybe you should get some sleep." He then let out a big sigh.
I'm done, Emma. I'm not going to work tomorrow.
"What? Not going to work? What's going on? Did he get into a fight with his boss?" I decided to probe further. "What do you mean you're not going tomorrow? Did something happen at work?"
No, I simply got fired.
"Fired?" A word I never expected to hear. Even I was taken aback. Wait a minute. Fired? Why so suddenly? That's too abrupt." "Don't ask me. They just told me out of the blue. I don't know if it's poor management or cost cutting, but honestly, I'm done with that place. I feel relieved now." "Done with it, you say?" To be honest, I was anything but relieved. We could afford our current home because both of us were working. Expenses for groceries, bills, and even money sent to my father-in-law and mother-in-law. Anyway, I've been fired. Just let me do as I please for today. My husband was seriously drunk and out of control. If he doesn't find a new job, we won't be able to continue sending money to his parents. With that thought, I decided to contact my father-in-law when the time was right. The next morning, as expected, I found my husband asleep on the sofa. Empty cans were strewn everywhere, indicating he had been drinking late into the night. After cleaning up the cans, I called my father-in-law. "Hello, is this father-in-law? Sorry for calling so early." "Oh, Emma. What's going on?" "Well, it's hard to say, but John was suddenly fired." "What? John got fired? Is this for real?" "Yes. He mentioned something about poor management and cutting personnel costs." "That's sudden." As I explained the situation to father-in-law, I felt terrible. After all, it was thanks to him and mother-in-law that my husband had his job. Ever since we got married, he was addicted to slot machines. In the beginning, I had no idea about his gambling habit and cheerfully saw him off to work each morning. "Take care, have a good day." "Yeah, I'll be late because of overtime today." "Don't push yourself too hard." I had always assumed that he was genuinely working hard. But when I noticed a tobacco smell coming from my husband, who never smokes, I instantly felt something was off. I confronted him right away. He defended himself by saying he started smoking due to stress. "No way. You used to hate smoking so much." My husband's behavior keeps getting stranger by the day. The kind and gentle man he once was is gone, and he's getting increasingly irritable. One day, he stopped hiding the fact that he was going to the casino. Even worse, he started pouring his entire salary and savings into gambling. He doesn't even care about skipping work anymore. All that matters to him is whether he wins or loses that day. "Hey, are you really not going to work anymore?"
"Shut up! It's none of your business. I'm using my own money, so stay out of it."
With that, he rudely dismisses me and hurries out of the house. Then, as always, he comes home after losing all his money. When he hit rock bottom, he even asked me for money.
"I'll double it and pay you back. Just lend me $300. I'm telling you, tomorrow's gonna be good. You can't lend me a few $100s when your husband is in trouble."
His character keeps changing due to gambling. The gentle husband I once knew is long gone. Eventually, he started borrowing money just to gamble. I finally lost it at this point.
"Wait, what are you doing? Borrowing money to play slots is absurd, don't you think?"
He doesn't show any sign of remorse, no matter how much I press him. In fact, he gets defensive and says it's my fault he had to borrow money.
"What? I had to take out a loan because you wouldn't lend me money."
This guy's totally addicted to gambling. If I don't stop him now, we'll go bankrupt.
"Are you kidding me? I didn't lend you the money because I wanted you to quit playing slots. I'm covering all our living expenses since our savings are gone, and you still blame me? Just lend me the money. I'll win at the slots and prove it. Just listen to me." Have you ever hit a big win? I don't think so. Stop chasing illusions and face reality. Stop interfering with my entertainment.
I wish he would at least stay within the bounds of reason. But my husband was fully addicted to gambling. This reckless behavior was tearing our marriage apart. No matter how much I tried to get through to him, he wouldn't listen. I was starting to lose hope. Days became long as I was consumed by worry. It was my father-in-law and mother-in-law who finally stepped in and set him straight.
Do you even realize you have a family? You're racking up debt over slot machines. Apologize to Emma now. Yeah. You have an amazing wife and you're ruining it. If you keep this up, she'll divorce you.
Father-in-law and mother-in-law scolded him time and again, stressing the importance of marriage and family. Finally, he broke down and apologized.
Emma, I'm really sorry. I swear, no more slot machines. Please forgive me.
Afterwards, my father-in-law said this to me. Emma, what our son did is inexcusable. We've also put you through so much. If you can, please find it in you to forgive him just this once. Seeing the desperation in my in-laws' apology, I decided to give my husband another chance. From there, it was father-in-law and mother-in-law who took on his debt and even helped him find a new job. Until he got his finances stable, they even sent us living expenses. It was thanks to father-in-law and mother-in-law that we could continue living as we had been. I was grateful from the bottom of my heart and sent them $500 every month to repay the favor. But now, if my husband loses his job, we won't be able to send them anything. I apologized to father-in-law over the phone.
Father-in-law, I'm really sorry. I can't believe this is happening while I'm still here.
Don't worry about it. It's the company's decision, right? You're not at fault. Father-in-law's kind words touched me deeply. However, I still have to break more difficult news. So, I'm really sorry, but I don't think we can continue sending money to you and mother-in-law anymore. Then father-in-law said, in a puzzled tone.
Remittance? Never received anything like that, you know.
My mind went blank at father-in-law's response.
You mean you didn't get the money I've been sending every month? The $500? We've been doing it consistently, haven't we?
What are you talking about? I even checked with my wife just now. She doesn't know anything about it either.
What?
That couldn't be right. I had been scrimping and saving last month, put $500 in an envelope, and given it to my husband. The idea that it never reached father-in-law and mother-in-law. Emma, what's going on here?
I don't know myself. But it's true that I've been giving my husband money every month to pass on to you.
Father-in-law spoke up again after hearing my desperate plea.
Emma, can I come over tonight? And let's keep this between us for now, okay?
All right. I had definitely been giving my husband the $500. If it hadn't reached father-in-law and mother-in-law, there's only one explanation: my husband. I can't believe this. He must have been using the money for himself. Unforgivable. I'll make him confess everything and he will face the consequences. An hour later, father-in-law and mother-in-law showed up at our house. When they walked into the living room, my husband looked surprised.
Dad, Mom, what are you doing here?
He was clearly rattled. It was obvious he was hiding something.
John, is there something you'd like to tell us?
Father-in-law indirectly confronted him, but my husband pretended not to know.
What are you talking about? Emma must be as confused as I am, so could you just leave?
I couldn't take it anymore and yelled at my husband.
Stop using me. Just tell the truth, now.
My husband looked at me with wide eyes.
What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. What happened to the money I've been giving you to pass on to your father and mother?
It was obvious that my husband was flustered by my questioning.
About that. Your parents said they never received any money. But I've been giving it to you every month for the last 2 years. Where did it all go? No, it's not what you think, Emma. There's a reason for this. A reason? Do tell. Where did that money vanish to? Explain it in a way we'll understand. Go on.
My husband's face turned increasingly pale, his earlier bravado gone.
What? Can't say? Don't tell me you've been using it yourself?
Both his parents and I glared at him. Finally realizing he couldn't lie his way out, my husband opened his mouth.
I'm sorry. I've been using it on slot machines. What? Slot machines? You've got to be joking.
It was the last thing I wanted to hear. Even after everything that happened in the past, he was gambling again.
I can't believe this. You promised you'd never touch slots again. We decided to send money to your parents as a way to make amends for all the trouble you've caused them. What are you thinking?
As I yelled at him, tears spilled down my cheeks. Was I the only one who thought we'd finally be able to give back to his parents? My vision blurred from the tears. His mother patted my back gently.
Just to confirm, is it true that you got laid off due to company reasons?
At his father's question, my husband visibly flinched.
Yes, it's true. John, if there's a time to correct the record, it's now. If we find out you're lying.
Before his father could finish, my husband hurriedly apologized to us.
I'm sorry. The truth is, I was fired due to my poor work performance. It wasn't due to company downsizing or cost cutting.
I was speechless at my husband's words. Completely dumbfounded. His dad, father-in-law, quickly pressed on.
What do you mean by work attitude? What the heck have you been doing?
Actually, they found out I've been skipping work to go to the casino.
Oh, this is hopeless.
The moment I heard that, everything felt utterly ridiculous. I had forgiven his past and decided to start fresh, to support each other. What was all my effort for?
Are you kidding me?
His dad exploded in anger.
How many times do we have to say it? Grow up and act responsibly, especially when you have a family. And yet, you pull this stupid stunt again?
As his mom, my mother-in-law, quietly wept beside me, I couldn't even shed a tear. All I could do was look at my pathetic husband, who just kept apologizing. Facing the enraged father-in-law, my husband kept on making excuses without end.
But I'll do better at my next job, okay? It was just bad luck this time. That's it. Let's get a divorce.
The words slipped out unconsciously.
W.H. Emma? Divorce? Why, you're joking, right?
To my distraught husband, I unleashed my pent-up anger.
A joke? You think I'm joking in this situation? But isn't divorce a bit extreme for this? Extreme? Are you kidding me? Do you even understand what you've done? It's no different than embezzlement.
My voice quivered with anger.
It's too late. What? You've betrayed us twice. I have no confidence in spending my life with someone like that. We're getting a divorce. I can't believe this.
His dad, who had been watching, nodded in agreement.
We don't consider you our son anymore. From now on, we cut our parental ties. Wait a minute. Emma. Mom. Dad. You're joking, right? Forgive me, please.
My husband was pleading through his tears, but our minds were made up. There was no turning back. I had him fill out the divorce papers right there in front of his parents.
Thank you for everything. Goodbye.
With my packed bags and the divorce papers in hand, I left the apartment.
Emma! Wait. Let's talk this over one more time. I won't do it again. I promise. Wait for me, Emma.
He screamed after me the entire time, but I never looked back. It seems his parents had the same resolve. They moved far away right after this incident, making sure he couldn't rely on them anymore. I haven't kept tabs on him since. Rumor has it, the debts from his gambling have piled up and he's in a tight spot. Now, he's apparently scraping by, running away from creditors. Hearing about his predicament doesn't stir any feelings in me. It's all his own doing. On the other hand, I've been living a fulfilling life. I still maintain a good relationship with his parents. We even meet up for meals during my days off. Marrying him was a mistake, but meeting such wonderful in-laws has become a treasure for me. Going forward, I want to give back to them as much as I can.